Hog Sty.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Hog Sty. Alex Zeese is not here. He has weenied out of the show tonight because he's sick, supposedly. Yeah, okay. We'll see when he returns next week how sick he really was. But fortunately, Dave is here as always. How are you, Dave?
I'm doing good. I can't disparage him too much because about a month ago I was in the same shoes, so
See,
I
I just
wound up
told
having to.
somebody this the other day. Nobody believes me, but this is the God's honest truth. I have never had a sick day, including all the way back to grade school. That I can as best I can remember. I don't believe I've ever missed a day of work or school for illness.
It's I would love to sit there and say the same thing, but you know, come spring season, my allergies get so bad, I get the sinus headaches and infections every now and then. I miss time because of that. When I was a kid, I absolutely missed time for certain things. I'm definitely not in the same boat with that one.
I'm like it's like my one gift. I have no gifts. I'm genetically inferior in many ways, but I have the constitution of like an Iron Man.
So basically, you're just a carrier. You get sick, but it doesn't affect you, but you pass on everyone else. So you start the cycle in the
I'm
whole
not
class when
typhoid
you're in
Mary. No,
school.
don't say that to me. No, I'm not. I'm not typhoid Mary. Someone else said this. See, this person at work said, because I spend all day long on Teams. It's just the worst. And this person says, "Oh, I'm sick," and I said, "Oh, I don't get sick." And this person does not believe me. And so I went through the same spiel. I've never missed a day. And the person, so and he said the same thing you did. Are you typhoid Mary? I said, "No, I'm not typhoid. I don't get sick. I don't know what to tell you, lady. I don't get sick."
uh,
Yeah. Well, I spent time in the Hog Sly's Nashville office this week, which is always, this past weekend, which is always interesting. But I'm glad to be back in Houston here. Um, uh, you know, it's just, I'm glad to be home. Um, but the other people who are sick, I guess I gotta say, Dan Snyder, he's a little sick bastard, isn't he? Um,
yeah.
yeah. It's bad transition, but I don't like hosting. Alex is a better host. I'm more like the reaction guy, but we're hosting today. So the little sick bastard, Dan Snyder, police credentialist for training camp. Um, there was lots of ownership news that has come out this week that we had to lead the show off with and talk about. So, Dave, why don't you give a rundown of kind of the status of it and let's react to it?
Well, as of right now, like 2 weeks ago, there was this whole report that we had the sale imminent, the offers in there. It's already approved, waiting for. We hear it every day, and actually got to a point where John Keim came out and says, "I'm not going to participate to this little S show here." It's like I'll let you know what's going on when I get viable sources, and it drags on. Past the owners meeting, and now here we are today, and apparently. The Josh Harris Group is sent the first real true official offer in, and apparently they have the full bank backing of the financial institution that they're using. Everything looks legitimate as per Adam Schefter on that. And there was the Canadian owner. I can't say his last name very
It
well.
starts with an
Suppose,
A. It's like Antetokounmpo or something
yeah,
like that.
something like that.
Just
And
call him
apparently
Stevie A.
that'll work for me. And apparently he has an offer in, but that's apparently they're not as confident in terms of his financial backing. In terms of they didn't use equity. I forget exactly how they
Well, I
phrased
can
it, but
explain this part. So,
okay,
um, if they're making roughly $6 billion offer, um, they're going to need to have roughly $2 billion as a cash equity injection, meaning that they'll have to put 30% up in cash. So it's somewhere around the $2 billion mark. But the rest of it's probably fine. At least most of it's probably going to be financed. The minority partners probably have some equity in it. Nobody finances 100%. Um, but when they say the finances are solid, this means that they have loan commitments from the lenders. That's what it means. And so this
okay,
other guy, Stevie A, may not have firm loan commitments, for their part. And by the way, like nobody loans hundreds of millions or billions of dollars from one institution. That's not how it works. And so it's because no lender is going to have that kind of risk on anything. And so it's usually like a team of lenders that's led by one major institution. That's usually how
Right.
the deals I've worked of this size have been like that. And so it's hard to line that. You don't just line that up in a day. You have to work on that. So my guess is that Stevie A is somewhere in that process. And he's like a hedge fund guy, so he knows how to do this. It's just he's just coming in late to the party. That's all.
Right.
So, but to me, the news that and my one Twitter review here today, which was thanks to you because you and Alex are sending me stuff, so I had to force to look at this hellscape. And then I realized that RG3 is claims to be or claims that he's about to be a partner in the Josh Harris ownership group.
Yes. And in fact, go a slight little backstory. I know back in late January, I think it was, he had put a tweet out there saying like any fans who want to participate in this with me, I'll take as little as $10 from you. We gather up all the money, we'll come in, and you have your name on there with me, and we'll put together our own little personal group to head in there with. And of course, we haven't heard anything about that.
Well,
Whether
that's
this is
because a football player who's probably worth 20 or 30, 40 million can't raise $6 billion. That's why you didn't
right,
hear from him again.
yes, and in fact, I think he has just enough money and assets to own. I think what 0.005%
Well,
in
yeah,
the
okay.
shares.
So if the bid is $6 billion, the basic math tells you that 60 million is 1%.
Right.
And RG3 may technically be worth $60 million as like a net worth kind of thing, but thing he doesn't have is $60 million laying in a bank, and even if he does, he's not going to spend every dime on that.
Right.
But he could hypothetically see. Here's how what it the NFL doesn't allow corporate ownership is the problem because you could get a big group, but he may have like financings lined up or something for a small part. But you gotta assume that his any interest stake he would have would be very, very, very small. And so why would this guy do it? Well, partly because probably he wants to boost the minority status, the number of minorities involved in the ownership group, which by the way my worldview is, that's an incredibly dumb thing to worry about. It's ridiculous, but that's where we are with the woke NFL now, unfortunately. So that's probably it. I'm assuming you're on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter anymore. I'm assuming the fans hate this. Is that right?
Well, actually, there's a bit of a mix, I guess, but most fans are just like, listen, you came in here, you gave us a nice splash season. We enjoyed your rookie year, but let's be honest, everything off the field, you're a bit too corny for us all, and your comments that you say, and it's just, and they just don't want to be bothered with him being any form of a representative with the team, which very minimal stakeholder he'd have, he probably would never even be inside the building anyways to begin
Well,
with.
that's what I was about to say. People, number one, I don't hate RG3 like some do. I mean, yeah, he's a bit
No,
corny, but actually, if you watch his college, his analysis stuff that he does, some of it's actually pretty good. I think he
no, he's
just says
actually
it in
very good on Saturdays. I do enjoy listening to him.
Yeah, I know. I thought
Yeah.
so too. He's a bit corny, granted, and he said something dumb. Chris and I went over it. He said he had a accidental racial ref. He said the word bugaboo, I think, and that can't. No, he was trying to say bugaboo, and he said something else instead, which I don't want to repeat because I don't want somebody to accuse me of being a racist. But it came out wrong. It's dumb. I mean, he's African American. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a bit corny, but he's a smart guy, and I think he has some good insights. But you hit the nail on the head, really, Dave, which is that okay? Let's assume he can scrounge up enough to have a 1% share in the stake, and assume that that is the winning bid. Well, my newsflash: minority owners have no say in corporate governance whatsoever in the NFL.
Right.
Zero. At most he would be able to call up the principal owner, which presumably would be Harris, and express an opinion. You have a business discussion with him. So I don't think he'll have any effect whatsoever on the actual running of the team itself. But what you would get is this is probably where the fans come in. You would get him on Twitter, mouthing off on Twitter about all kinds of stuff, and the Washington fans who resent him for some reason, which I also don't totally understand,
No,
because
that just all goes down to that whole Kirk Cousins and RG3 and those two factions. The factions who back Kirk Cousins will never appreciate RG3 and what he did on the football field. That's all.
I still think the team didn't handle him well.
No, not at all.
I
Yeah,
mean, they should have put him in his place. If Mike Shanahan had been smart enough to put him in his place and tell him, you will not go to the owner, get your parents out of the building, behave. We're going to coach you up like a pro. And not the whole. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but point is, I think his career could have been drastically different if the team had handled him correctly. And Shanahan definitely had not let him go back in the game in that playoff game.
yeah,
You
I
know,
agree.
ruined his
Yep.
career.
Yes.
So, and this, by the way, the same can be said for Magic Johnson, because Magic Johnson, recall, is supposed to be another minority shareholder or partner rather in this ownership group.
Right.
Listen, lifelong Dodger fan here. Um, Magic showed up at the beginning. So I've explained this before, but Frank McCourt was the old owner of the Dodgers. He was a total train wreck, like a Dan Snyder level train wreck, maybe worse. He didn't have the sexual stuff, but he had just the business acumen was just atrocious.
Right.
Anyway, so the new owner, who's a guy named Stan Katzton, who's another hedge fund guy, um, is the owner. He brought in Magic as a minority shareholder. Why? Well, Magic happens to be a hero in the city of Los Angeles. So what Magic's role was when they were acquiring the team, he was the guy out front with the $1 million smile that he has and all his charisma, talking to the media about this and that. But after it was over, he kind of faded away. He went to some games, showed up at the World Series, but he doesn't have a role in the team at all. And so he
Hmm.
was just sort of a PR stunt a little bit. He could do that here again, but I
And
also
we
don't
we we
think.
could use that too here for a little bit, anyways.
Yeah, but I also think that he's. I mean, he owns Los Angeles. He's a hero to
Right.
I'm like recovering Laker fan here, but those teams are what I really love, and I don't know if that's he's not as much of a hero. He's just another famous basketball player in DC.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you can use him in that way that they did with the Dodgers. But either way, those guys ultimately will be silent.
Right. I think what Magic Johnson offers over RG3 is obviously with the notoriety, of course, he has that, and definitely over RG3. But he also brings a little bit more of a ownership acumen, at least because he's been there. He knows the inner workings of it. He understands what his role would be. I don't think RG3 would understand what his role would be.
Oh, not at all.
You know what I mean. So it's like, and that in itself can cause internal problems you just don't want to deal with.
Well, also,
Yeah.
Magic Johnson, if you don't know, Magic Johnson has very, very significant, large real estate holdings. He owns
Yes.
restaurants, movie theaters. He's got investments all over the place.
I
And so
actually
he,
mentioned that in the article you'll be reviewing
oh,
today.
yeah. So
Yes.
Dave has pieces coming out that I have not edited yet. So I don't know what he's written in it. So some of what Dave is saying, go to the piece, which will be out uh, either Thursday afternoon or Friday morning, one of those two.
And feel free to add to the Magic Johnson section for me
It
by all
frankly
means.
may be Friday because it's
No, that's
late and
fine.
I've got to edit and do all this, so it may be Friday.
Sounds good.
But anyway,
But
so
yeah,
yeah, so Magic has some business acumen that could be helpful, but it'll be helpful to the business side to the principal owner. It won't be anything that the fans even see.
right.
It seems for a while I thought Tillman Fertitta was kind of in the lead. Rick Snyder has reduced the Tillman Fertitta odds. Apparently, he's buying a casino in Louisiana, which Rick seems to think that makes him out. Well, Fertitta's always owned casino. He's owned other casinos. This is not the first.
Right.
So I don't know why that would matter, except for money maybe. Um, but Bezos, I've not heard any Bezos news. Have you heard Bezos news, Dave?
The only thing that I hear about Bezos is this irrational desire for this fan base for him to come in, drop 7 billion, and just buy the team. I mean, everyone has got to realize. I know he's an upgrade over what we have. I understand that. Anything's an upgrade over what we have in Dan Snyder. 100% agree. But Jeff Bezos is nothing more than Dan Snyder without the scandals. Now, granted, he's more successful
He
in the
has had some
business side,
scandals, by the way.
but not to
Not
yeah,
that level.
right. And yes, he took what was originally started as a book club in Amazon and made it in this $100 billion industry. I get all that, but the thing is, Jeff Bezos, and I mentioned it in the article too, is that Bezos carries a certain air and arrogance about himself. The man has never failed along the way. It's always been his way. Do it his way. If you get in his way, he gets you out of the way. He doesn't take input from you very, very well. His workplace environment is not very conducive to morale and so forth. Which obviously sounds pretty familiar right there. So it's like what you're going to get in Bezos is potentially, not saying it will, but potentially what you had in Dan Snyder in the very, very beginning. A meddling owner who wants to do everything his way and will override the decisions of all the football minds in the building. And I don't think you want to go down that road again.
Yeah, I agree with most of what you're saying. Um, the meddling part, I think you're right in saying he would meddle, but he would simultaneously might be a very, very hands-off owner because he's got a ton of other things to do.
That's a good point too.
He's
Yes.
launching rockets into space and all kinds of stuff. So he may meddle and not in a good way, but then he also may be absent for large periods. But you're totally right about his, the workplace at Amazon is not good.
Mm-hmm.
He's known as a tyrant,
Yes.
there. And yeah, I don't know if you guys really know what the heck you want. And most people on Twitter are morons anyway.
Well,
It's a
it's
name
just
that
a
they
name.
recognize.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's a name. It's a
that's all it is.
notoriety. He's worth over 100 billion. All it's just that's all great. That's all
Yeah.
whatever.
So the other part of this, though, is so that's the kind of the status of the groups. Rick Snyder, our buddy Rick Snyder, thinks there's another um, unnamed potential buyer out there. Um, Now, there was a rumor going around about a former Duke basketball player who's a wealthy, Brian
Yeah.
Davis, who's a very,
Yes.
very wealthy businessman now. That seemed a bit far fetched. It wasn't from a legitimate source. They were talking about him, putting down 7 billion, which is way out of whack with what the value is. So I don't know how
Right.
much stake I put into that. Rick Snyder put that as like a 1% chance or something, so very small. So take
Right.
that for what you will. But here's the other side of this timing. You mentioned this at the beginning. 2 weeks ago, we had the sale is imminent. We got a panicked text message from our own Alex East on a Saturday. It may be happening, guys. And of course, it didn't, as you said. Um, Let me tell you something. This takes time, okay? I'm working on a deal that's right now that's about 7 million, not billion, million. This has taken 2 months to even get to the point where the parties have business terms done, and we're not done with that. And it's
Right.
taken 2 months. Um, Now multiply that by 100,000, and that's where you got with 6 billion. Is this not the fans who've not done this before think that this is easy? And it's very, 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 very complicated. So it may have been that at one point in time, Danny, they were close. Maybe they had almost an agreement on terms. It fell apart. Who knows? So the timing of this obviously is owners' meetings. Um, there's a Ron Rivera video which Dave sent me a few minutes ago, in which Ron was talking about a May 2nd deadline, and I said, "What the heck is the May 2nd deadline?" You said that's the next owners' meeting. Um, it's not going to be done by May 2nd. No matter what happens, it won't be done by May 2nd.
Well, I
It,
think AJ Perez, I think it was, it come in and he was talking with I want to say I can't remember which insider. I don't think it was Schefter. I can't remember who it was, but they said there is a real likely possibility this could draw all the way out into October.
Well, absolutely, it could.
So,
Again, these deals take time. I've had one that's what was the total amount? About 70 million. Took a year and a half.
wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just sometimes how these things work. You know, when you have a whole bunch of parties, a whole bunch of banks, and a whole bunch of people involved, and it is not something you can just. It's not like trading in your TV. You know, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not taking your car to the Chevy dealer and getting a new one. You can do it all in 3 hours. That's not how this works. So, what the only thing that could happen by May, what he could do is decide to accept one of these offers and reach and agree to terms, have like a term sheet. And at that point, then he could go to the owners and have the owners vet him. Because the process is that the NFL owners finance committee needs to vet and approve the owner. This is where Howard
Right.
Milstein got in trouble back in 1999. Is he
Right.
never got through the finance committee? They hated him. They didn't like him personally. They didn't like his bid at all. The financial backing wasn't there, and so they need to go through all that. Josh Harris has been through it once. He was a bidder on the Broncos and lost to the Walton family. So
Right.
he's already been through that vetting process, so it may not take very long. But that is all that could happen. So in May, you could potentially have one or more bidders get presented to the owners at the owners meetings as potentials and they get approved. But then, yeah, it could take months. It could take a long time. Maybe not. Maybe they'll work, maybe they'll get it done quickly, but the odds are it will take months.
Now, what's the typical protocol though? It's like, say, Snyder accepts a deal and they start the vetting process in whatever time in May. So from that until the time it actually goes through and the new owners take over the team, what happens in that time frame in terms of ownership responsibility, in terms
Oh,
of
well, Dan
decisions that
Snyder is
Dan,
the owner. Dan is the
yeah.
owner.
Now would he still have to make decisions in consideration of the new owner coming in, or does that even matter, or is that
No,
more
it
of a
does matter. No, it does matter. It matters. You
okay?
know where, if people want to get a sense of this, there was an HBO show that came out this past year called Showtime, maybe. It was about it was a fictionalized drama about the Los Angeles Lakers in the late 70s, 1979, when Magic Johnson was drafted. Excuse me. And the ownership, Jack Kent Cooke of Washington fame, was the outgoing owner and sold the team to Jerry Buss. And in that show, it shows a little bit about how the interactions took place while the sale was ongoing. And mind you, this is only like $100 million. It was much cheaper, obviously. It was,
Right.
40 something years ago. But it showed how they were taking in consideration what the new owner, wanted and said, and all that matters. And so if you like have an agreement to sell, basically the outgoing owner is going to not be able to expend any serious assets. So that kind of puts a halt on like free agency, major moves, because there's going to be an agreement that you don't do major things, to put
Right.
it. And so what will happen in my assumption is that this will probably be a stock purchase agreement, because the owner is an entity called Pro Football Inc. So there's stock, and so it'd be too hard to do an asset purchase. So my guess is that the new owner will just buy out or merge. It'll be either a stock purchase or a merger with another entity, and that's what'll happen. And that just takes, you got to draft documents. There's all kinds of loan documents. There'll be a stack a mile high of loans, and it just physically takes time to put all that together, because I've not done a football team, but I've done this.
Wow. That's
So,
way too much work that I want to get into.
well, yeah, I mean, and of course, the guys who do that kind of work are getting paid handsomely. They're getting
Sure.
paid $800 an hour, or more.
Right.
So we'd all take that. Um, okay, so that is the latest on ownership. Have I missed anything? Have we missed anything, Dave, with the ownership situation?
Just I know there was Roger Goodall, I do believe, mentioned that he does promise to have the Mary Jo White investigation released once it's done. I'm assuming that'll probably coincide with the potential sale.
Kind
You know,
of
and
like an F you to Dan on the way out, a little
yeah,
bit.
probably, yeah. So
So apparently, Dan, I saw a story somewhere that this indemnity issue is still hanging around out there, and Danny still wants this. Let me just reiterate: Dan Snyder ain't getting indemnity from the NFL.
right,
I would bet my life on this. There's no way the NFL is going to do that. And watch me be wrong, since I'm saying being so decisive about it. But there is no way the NFL is going to give any sort of worthwhile indemnity to a former owner under these conditions. That is crazy. Unless he's literally going to blackmail him.
right.
you know, but even then, I mean, they're talking federal crimes and stuff. I think it's crazy. He's not going to get identified. Maybe maybe the negotiation point is to bury the investigation report. That I could
Right.
see. We're
Yeah.
not going to identify you, but we won't release a report.
Right.
And Congress is out of it. The House is now in Republican hands. They want no part of it. They have more important things to do. So it could probably go away. And I mean, the fans will always hate him, but he could just fade off onto a yacht and nobody ever hear from him again.
And unfortunately, it sucks for the women and stuff involved, but that's
That might be the price
unfortunately.
everybody pays to get rid of this guy.
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So we will move on here from this. Ron Rivera, as I mentioned, talked a little bit about this ownership situation, but before we go to him, actually, Jason Wright, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Jason Wright had an interesting comment, which, Dave, I believe you are the one that sent this to me. I think you noticed it first. You want to read the Jason Wright comment?
I don't have that in front of
Okay,
me
I got it.
actually.
This is from
Okay.
Nikki.
Sorry.
Nikki, I'm going to mispronounce her name. Nikki
Nikki
Javalia.
Javala.
That it? Nikki
Mm,
Chavala.
yeah.
This is a tweet from her from the 29th, 11:40 a.m. I assume that's Eastern. Me, meaning her. Is the sale going to happen? Commanders president, C-Words president Jason Wright. I don't see why it wouldn't. I'm so confused by the skepticism. It's a potential transaction until it's a transaction, but yeah. Um, I have thoughts on this, but Dave, your thoughts first.
Well, I just think it just shows that there is, to me personally, I think there is a deal in place, and I think that deal in place is going to be ultimately to the Josh Harris group. I just think a lot of what's being thrown out there with these other protective order, which is coming from this guy named Charles Gasparino, which he is a Fox Business Network and correspondent in New York Post columnist and so forth, which many people call him the mouthpiece of Dan Snyder for some reason. He's coming out with all the reports, like he came out today. Mark Cuban officially says he's not going to buy the team, and
Oh,
he
we
was the
didn't
one
mention
that
that.
brought in.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was a rumor, I guess, of Cuban.
yeah. So and he was the one that mentioned in there with the Duke basketball player a week ago, and he brought up that Canadian Stephen A. right there as well, and so
The
forth.
Canadian Stephen A.
Yeah, the Canadian Stephen A. So, but I think a lot of that is a ruse to try to maybe put a little more pressure on Josh Harris and maybe trying to get him to come up a little bit more on the offer and so forth. But I think ultimately, personally, I think it's going to end up being the Josh Harris ownership group. I think everything's aligned for it.
I thought this comment was from Wright was interesting in that it was really actually the first time anybody affiliated with the team has acknowledged that there's a sale.
Right.
Don't forget how this started. What came out as sort of an official statement is that from Bank of America months ago was that they would explore potential transactions. That was all it
Mm-hmm.
said. That could mean
Yep.
anything. That could mean Dan wants to find some more hookers and bring them into his yacht. That could mean he's trying to, bring in a Saudi Arabian oil sheik. It could have meant anything. And this, as far as I can remember, is the first official confirmation from a member of the team that yes, there's a sale. And then today, one of the videos about Ron Rivera, he also said something like to the effect of this sale is going to happen
Right.
because he was talking about. We'll get to it in a minute, but he was talking about the impact of it on the team. So I think that was an interest. That was a newsworthy comment, and it wasn't just Jason just babbling nonsensically. I
Yeah.
think it actually meant something.
Yeah. It
And
wasn't conjecture at all. Yeah.
yeah, and actually, and it may if you I don't know if Jason's as smart, but I mean it may have been more planned than that. It might have been kind of throwing a bone to the fans to let them kind of stop worrying and be relaxed. Don't worry, this is going to happen because he's not blind.
No.
He knows that everybody hates ownership and all of that. So it might have
And he
been.
gets tagged in like a dozen tweets every day about it,
Oh,
practically.
I'm sure,
So,
and who knows what he
sure.
reads, how much he reads, but he knows that everybody
Yeah.
hates Dan Snyder. So it's
Yep.
possible that this is like him throwing a lifeline to the team or to the fan base, rather. Okay, so Ron Rivera. Ron Rivera did a couple interviews in the past couple days, um, and it just if I was a real serious fan, I would have major heartburn with what he said
Mm.
because he's talking about we had a chance to do some roster building. Let's start here. I have lots of thoughts, but Dave, your thoughts on Ron commenting about finally doing roster building?
Well, that's the baffling part of this, and I don't tend to align with Chris Russell very often, but I agree with him. It's awfully confusing. And going to year four, it's like you talk about you're looking forward to the roster building, and we're the first time we're building a roster. It's like, are you talking about like in year four, you're finally going to construct a roster now, or are you talking about going into year four during your roster build? Because I'm kind of hoping you don't mean the latter on that one because you've spent the first 3 years doing what then? You were just rolling the dice here and there without any plan, without anything to go forward with. I mean, it's
He
confusing. It's
kind of was
frustrating.
though, wasn't he? Really, kind
Yes,
of doing that. I mean,
especially with the linebacking core. Absolutely.
well, and offensive line and quarterback.
Yeah.
Where did he really have a plan?
I
Uh,
mean,
you know,
yeah. I mean, I saw an semblance of kind of a plan of what he was trying to do when he brought in Carson Wentz, but when he deconstructed the offensive line, it's like, well, you took away. Yeah,
what do you
all
think was going to
quarterback.
happen?
It's exactly. It's like, yeah, sure, all quarterbacks need protection. But Carson Wentz to that next level, he absolutely needs to have it because then it gets mental with his game and you lose him. And that's exactly what
But
happened again.
also, Carson Wentz was year 3. Don't forget.
Yes,
Perhaps we should have thought of this in year 1. How
maybe.
about that?
That probably been a good idea.
And if you
Well,
didn't believe in
actually,
Dwayne Haskins from the start, rest in peace to
right.
Dwayne. I mean, trade him. Don't take the job. Maybe. Uh, you
Another
know.
guy they mismanaged.
Oh, he could be the exemplar in the owner's manual of how to ruin a quarterback.
Yeah,
And the
right.
team really, really did him wrong. They
Oh,
really did.
100%. I mean, it's because the only thing that he lacked was just maturity for the game as a leader. That's the only thing. I mean, he had the arm talent, he had the arm strength, he can make all the
Athletic
throws.
ability.
Absolutely, and yeah, he had a high IQ, everything. It was just a maturity factor. It was like, well, Ron Rivera, you're a leader of men here. You're supposed to get guys focused and motivated. Well, that was the one guy that you should have done that to, and you didn't do
Or
that.
maybe sit him. How about this? Sit him for a year. Let him learn. Make sure
Yes,
he understands you're our future. But we're gonna
right.
have you learn. Bring in whoever, somebody, the Alex Smith type,
Yep.
and let him. So, yeah, I thought so. To me, yeah, I think that Ron was probably not implying that he's just starting his roster building now, but it kind of came
Right.
off wrong. And
Yes.
considering the lack of roster building he's done to date, I mean, he kind of stumbled into Terry McLaurin, uh, you know.
Well, he did
But
bring in Curtis Samuels and draft Dotson, so I mean, the receiving quick, I can give him some credit
okay,
for that one.
well, granted,
Some,
but Curtis Samuel, anyway, he's done a little bit for the wide receivers, granted, but the linebackers are a mess, like you said. The offensive line is a train wreck. Look at all the now we're bringing in a bunch of new pieces in offensive line. Excuse me, none of which inspires tremendous confidence with me. So that's a mess. Um, Now the other thing he said this week, one of the other things, he is kind of hedged a little bit on Sam Howell. I saw this today, um,
mm-hmm.
indicating there, maybe Jacoby Brissett may have a chance, and that's the right move.
Right.
all you Sam Howell people out there who are like it's Sam Howell or bust, and this guy is the next John Elway, you're insane.
Well,
Okay,
you said that in the first part
I
of the
did,
offseason. Yeah.
I did, yeah, and I think that this isn't really Dan being inconsistent, or not Dan. This isn't Ron being inconsistent so much as is I think you took his words 2 months ago too literally.
Yeah.
He knows he had one quarterback on the roster, and then somebody named Jake Fromm, who's not a realistic candidate. He's not going to go, geez, we need to go get some quarterbacks. He's not going to say that because not going to say that to the press. He's not going to do that to the confidence of the one guy he has.
Yeah.
But
I
actions
agree.
speak louder than words.
Right.
They bring an experienced vet with starting potential, and they say, he's basically saying either one of them could start. Whoever wins, and that's the right move.
Right. And the beauty of Brissett is that he's good enough to start. He's good enough to win you games. So he gives that competition to keep Sam Howe on his toes and to progress forward. So, and the beauty of the situation is that now you give Howe that little bit of pressure. It's your job to lose, probably. Most, more than likely, he's proven he's got some arm talent. It's definitely a mobile quarterback and so forth. So, as they continue building this roster, and if they fall flat on the face of the quarterback, guess what they could do next year? They can make that move, and while they put the rest of the pieces in place, then they can drop a rookie quarterback in there, jump to the top of the drafts or whatever. But
Or maybe, look, I mean, maybe Brissett dramatically outplays him in training camp.
possible,
And
very
if that's the
possible.
case, maybe they start him because they don't have a big investment in Howell. They got him for
No,
a fifth round draft pick. I mean, he's not a
yep,
guy that the team. Great if any fifth round draft pick is starter quality, wonderful. You've
hmm,
come out ahead. But if they don't, they don't.
right.
They're not going to lose sleep over it. And so they had to have a veteran come in. They had to have a veteran.
And you
And
got to
so,
and you got to imagine that Brissett is kind of salivating at the opportunity because
oh yeah,
when he finally had a good receiving core in Cleveland, he put up some of his more proficient
he
numbers. I
did.
mean, he wasn't astronomical in his numbers, but he was very proficient. His touchdown interception ratio was improved. His completion percentage went up, and now he could possibly play with this trio of receivers and a pretty decent running game and a good pass catching running back. I mean,
It's
he
not a half
has
bad situation for him.
no, absolutely not.
And the other thing
So
is, Ron just signed him. Are you going to come in and go, yeah, this guy's a backup? Are you
right.
really going to do that to him? No, you're going to give both of these guys hope in order to make them perform.
Well, the only way
It,
you were getting Brissett to sign anyways, you were going to
you
give
have
him
to
that
give him hope.
opportunity. Yes.
Right. And it's not like there's the fifth overall draft pick is sitting there on the roster when everybody knows that person, like a Dwayne Haskins type, is, you know,
Right.
that's just not the case. And so,
Now, I will say if that kid from Florida, Anthony Richardson, falls and he comes outside the top 10, do not be surprised that Ron Rivera makes a move for him because he reminds a lot of people of Cam Newton with a more accurate arm. Still very raw in his
Cam Newton was
mechanics and
far more
everything.
ready, though.
He was far more ready, yes. But Ron Rivera, some of his best years came under Cam Newton. So if he sees him sitting there, don't be surprised if he think at least a minimum makes that attempt to possibly move up to get him. Which I think
Yeah,
would be a mistake, honestly. But
I do too. I don't really like Richardson at 16. I think he's too raw. I mean, he's one of these guys that looks like he fell out of the quarterback factory. He's got all the measurables. He's got the look. He's got the size, the athletic ability, the arm, and all of that. But if you really watch him, he's kind of a mess. Uh,
yeah, I mean he needs more time with his mechanics. Probably should have
yeah,
stayed in one more year. I
but
mean,
that doesn't mean you're not wrong. I mean, if he's
right.
there, it's possible. And then the whole plan gets shot to hell.
And besides, it'd be baffling to me if he did that anyway. In year four, you take a guy like that who's going to need at least a
You've
couple of
kind of already
years,
made your bed, and that's it.
right?
We've already
Yeah,
talked about this. Yeah, it would really be odd to do that, particularly if this ownership situation is still pending. I don't know. It seems like a bold move. You kind of want to
yeah,
maintain status quo. A lot of times when team when team ownership changes, there's getting to be a sale, they strip down the roster.
Right.
A lot of times, they'll cut it to the bone in order to hand over a minimally burdened asset.
Sure.
You
Yeah.
know, so I don't know. I think you're right. I think it's very unlikely. But if you never know, if the guy's sitting there, God help us, Will Levis, who's even worse, that guy's another train wreck too. He's not ready either. But if one of
Yeah.
those guys are there,
Will Levis reminds me of when Blaine Gabbert came out,
yeah, that's not a
and
bad
he made
comp.
that meteoric guy. He made that meteoric rise, and they were looking at him as being the next great quarterback. And
Now look
I
at
was
him.
like, come on, man.
Well, these coaches
So
are so arrogant that they think they can coach that.
right,
And the players, I mean, I get it. You want to make money. That I certainly respect. I understand that,
sure,
but a lot of them would really be better served by playing another year.
yeah,
And I
yep,
say that, of course, knowing that Sam Howell would have been drafted much higher if he'd come out as a junior. I mean, so it's a risk,
yeah.
but a lot of them would be better. Like Dwayne Haskins would have been better off playing another year at college. Another year of maturity, all of that.
Sure.
Um, so okay, so that is Ron Rivera. Did we hit Ron Rivera's comments fully and accurately? Is there
I
anything
think
else?
so. Yeah.
Okay. Um, so I wanted to readdress Lamar Jackson because number one, he keeps getting rumored to, like rumor milled to Washington, and the powers, multiple people from Washington says they're not interested. But I do find it fascinating that utterly nobody's interested in this guy. He's a former league MVP. He's only what 27 years old or something.
Right.
And so why is nobody at all interested in him? And I think it's a confluence of circumstances. But your thoughts?
Actually, I have a question on that for you
Okay.
because you probably know a little more about that. Because I'm sure you recall the NFL putting out the no for his business partner. I think it was like Ken Francis or something like that. I forget his name, but the NFL had told teams not to do any
Yes.
negotiating with him.
Yeah. Well,
Because
you
he's
know
not.
why that is? So I looked into this at one point in time. Um, to be to be called an agent for an NFL player, you have to be licensed by the NFL to be an agent
That's what I
and
thought. Yep.
certified rather. And there's this week long class you got to go to in New York. So for me, I thought, I'd have to go spend money to go sit in New York for a week, and unless you have a bunch of clients sitting there, it's kind of a side gig. Most agents, it's a side gig. Most agents are attorneys with actual practices, and they do it on the side.
Right.
They'll have one or two of them. So it seemed like an expensive waste of time for me, basically. So I didn't do it. Um, so this guy that they're talking about may be a business associate of Lamar Jackson, but he's not a certified agent. So the letter that you're talking about, which the NFL sent out, said whatever. I forget his name was. You said it was Francis, whatever it
I
was.
think I got probably completely wrong, but it's
However it
something
was,
on it.
it's
Yeah.
that guy's not a licensed agent and cannot negotiate on behalf of Lamar Jackson. What he could do is
Yes.
like read the contract in the background and tell
Right.
Lamar what to say or his opinion about the deal. That
Sure.
I've been asked to do for a couple players, um, and that's fine. But what I can't do and what that guy can't do is negotiate on behalf of the player.
And I wonder if that's part of the holdup because I wonder if Lamar is trying to have him speak for him, and these NFL teams like, well, we can't do that for the reason you spoke to in terms of he's not a licensed agent, didn't go through the required courses and so forth. And it makes sense. I mean, the NFL has a protocol, especially contractually through the collective bargaining agreement.
Well, that's
They
what
had
it is. It's a
exactly.
collective bargaining agreement thing.
So
It's possible, and it's not. They don't do that class all the time. It's like once or twice a year or something.
yeah,
Um, so it may be too late. And listen, I mean, Lamar obviously could get any agent he wants. He could go down to Drew Rosenhaus tomorrow, and Drew would probably get him signed. But Lamar's kind of a weird dude, about this sort of stuff. And he's very protective of his cash, which I respect that. But and he had his mom doing it at one, advising him at one point in time, and
yeah. I saw someone mention, and it makes sense that teams aren't going to negotiate with him prior to the draft. They want to wait till they get through the draft and then negotiate for a contract because if he accepts whatever contract, and Baltimore doesn't match, that means the 2 first-round picks they give up would be the next 2 years' first-round pick, and they keep their first-round pick this
It's
year.
possible. I mean, they can't wait forever. There's a window for this. I think it's July, and so or is it July? Don't hold me to that. But there's a window that the window closes for the franchise tag thing, so they can't wait forever. But they can wait through the draft, and that's not a bad idea. But I think the other thing is number one. I think there's multiple things. First of all, his play style. I'm a fan, but he takes a specific type of offense. You can't throw him into every offense. That's one. Number two, his contract demands. If he really wants Deshaun Watson money, nobody's going to give him Deshaun Watson money. It's just as simple as
Right.
that. They don't want to. The owners do not want to normalize 100% guarantees. The Cleveland Browns really screwed over their owners.
Yeah, and they got a lot of pushback on that because a lot of ownership groups did not want to see that happen, and
Yeah,
especially to a guy like Deshaun Watson, for crying out
with
loud.
all his mess. Yeah,
Exactly. So it's like, well, and just like what RG3 had alluded to before in one of his comments, well, if Deshaun Watson deserves it, well, then he deserves it. Well, you're missing the whole key point of that. The rest of the league doesn't want to get tied up with all of that, which is
Deshaun Watson's an outlier.
yes, exactly. And it's like, and yeah, you mentioned about his style of play. It's I mean, you can't look past the fact that he's missed time the last 2 years because of injury. A couple of, or one of them, I don't think was even due to his play style. I think it was just more or less him in the pocket, and the pocket collapsed and he got hit wrong or whatever, something like that, which happens to every quarterback. But his play style is pretty much to what the NFL is today.
He's one of the
You
most
know,
prolific runners in NFL history
yeah,
already.
yeah, sure. And and he's only a couple years removed for throwing. Well, he completed almost 68% of his passes and threw 36 touchdowns in his MVP year. So the idea that he can't throw the ball proficiently is just wrong, just completely wrong. Because what he did at Louisville to where he came from, he was nothing. He was just progressing upward. It was
He
constantly
was.
up, up, up. That's all it ever was. And then once he lost his receivers and Brown and Duvernay, that never panned out for him. And when Bateman can't stay on the field, he had no receivers. He
Those
had an
receivers he
agent.
had in his last year really sucked.
Oh, they were horrible. He had
Yeah.
Mark Andrews, which is someone you can cover fairly. I don't want to say fairly easy. I don't want to disrespect him that way,
They
but
dropped
he's
a
not
lot of
Travis
balls
Kelsey.
too, though. They
Yeah,
dropped a ton of balls on it.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
So the other thing with Lamar though is I think he's doing a poor job of selling himself because the agent's job isn't just to negotiate a contract. I mean, it's part of it, obviously, but the other part of it is he's got to sell his players.
yeah,
What makes Drew Rosenhaus is he can call any team and convince them to sign the player because he
right.
has the time and the experience and the knowledge and the contacts to just pick up the Chicago Bears.
Yeah,
Call the GM of the Bears and just say, "Hey, I've got a player for you." Lamar
right.
Jackson, he can make some phone calls, but selling himself like that is I think, very difficult for him. And I
Yeah, there's
don't
an
think
art
from
to it.
like an
Absolutely.
academic standpoint, he's very smart. And that probably, I mean, football wise, he is, but I don't know if academically he's very smart. He
Well,
doesn't come across that way, and that can't help.
I know. Well, from back his time as back in time in Louisville, I think he had a pretty decent GPA and so forth. But I think he was more or less. He was always focused on football. I mean, he was in the coach's office
Oh yeah,
there
I'm
like at
not
6 in the
disparaging
morning.
him.
No, 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 no. Yeah, I know that. It's just his focus was his career. His career was obviously football.
Right.
So he soaks everything in. He can. He's gotten so much better in terms of reading everything at the line, pre-snap, and everything. So I mean, the IQ for his career is absolutely 100% there. It's just I mean, especially the lack of experience that you spoke to. That other side, the business side. I mean,
He's not a business
he
lawyer.
right.
Yeah.
He probably knows just as much as me, which is like Nothing. I don't
Well,
know
you would
anything
hopefully
about
be
that
smart
site.
enough to call me if you ever had this issue, Dave.
Well, sure, because I know you. I have you
Yeah.
there, sure.
If you
But
want to talk to me, Lamar, well, I can't. I see. I'm prohibited from helping him. So, okay. So that's and so I do think that Washington's out on Lamar Jackson. I mean, they've said it repeatedly. I don't think Ron and Eric Bieniemy want to totally remake the offense just for
right.
him. So he's out.
Although I've other comment on a couple of his posts just ask him, hey, by any chance, do you like the color burgundy and gold? Just asking.
Oh, to Lamar,
Yeah, tomorrow. He's
has
never
he ever
replied back to
responded?
me yet. Not yet.
Yeah, not
I'm
yet.
hoping I at least get a like one of these times anyway.
That would be huge national news
Yes,
if
it
he did.
would.
Okay, so we will move on. So that's Lamar Jackson. I want to address that. Um, Next thing here, there have been reports that the NFL has considered opening up the Thursday night football rules to allow teams to make more than one Thursday night football appearance a year. Now, this is apparently was considered and then tabled at the NFL owners meeting. But tabled means basically they didn't have the votes because they don't want to vote it down, which means it kind of goes away. And so this is a situation of you're kind of reading the room and
Right.
you go, gosh, we don't have it, so we're not. So we're gonna pull it off the agenda, and we're gonna go schmooze some more, and maybe vote on it later. So I hate this. I hate Thursday night football generally
I agree.
because I think it's bad football. It's bad. The teams hate it. It's bad for the teams. It's not entertaining. And I've said on IJB many times, like the NFL sometimes doesn't understand that less of a good thing is more. If you bury people in games, it becomes routine and it's not quite as special. So if you have
Right.
football every damn night of the week, I think you may start to bore some of your audience. So to me, it's more special to have Sunday as the day. Then we'll throw one
Yes.
other day in there, Monday. But you start to have a bunch of other games. I don't like it. So Thursday night football, I bring this up because it's seems to be a possibility if they can campaign and convince people there's more money to be made for it.
Right. Well, I have two comments about it that I even tweeted out there twice that I know Roger Goodall will never read. I know that. I understand that, but it's
You gave it a
one. I
shot
don't.
anyway.
Yeah, sure. Why not? I got the platform to use it. But I sat there and said, one, I don't want to ever hear him talk about player safety again because obviously he just doesn't care. Because even the players have even talked about how much of a strain it is on their bodies having to go on a short week, and even after that they get 10 days of rest after that till next to the following Sunday. But that short week it's just every day is so valuable for them. And now they're talking about the where teams could have multiple Thursday night games. It's just ridiculous. And then they're talking about the whole flex side of it, flexing games to Thursday. And it's like, well, you know what, Roger? Don't talk about how much you appreciate and love the fans and you do everything for the fans. Because let me tell you something. I'm now a season ticket holder, right? If I have a game that I'm scheduled to go to on a Sunday, and I don't think they'll flex Washington, but if they flex Washington to a Thursday night game now, all of a sudden,
Might not be able to make a Thursday night game.
I may not
It's a
be able to
work
make
day.
because in work day I got a work schedule. It's like so I got to make plans for the trip that I already made plans on Sunday to make. Because I'm just about 2 hours away, and then I got to do what I got to do on a Thursday night, driving back after the game, which is going to be a wreck to begin with. And I still got to go to work the following morning. Oh, so I'll, you know what, just use my personal time and take the day off on Friday. Thanks, Roger. I
Or
don't need the
sell the
money.
ticket. Or you'd have to sell the ticket.
Or I have to sell the ticket. I mean, it's just there's so much inconvenience on the fan side. So obviously, you don't think about the customer. You don't think about player safety. All that doesn't matter. It's like what you alluded to. It's how much more money they can
Yeah.
make.
Well, I don't think they, at the end of the day, really particularly care what the impact on the fan is.
No,
Uh,
they haven't cared in probably over 10
What
years.
doesn't matter to them because you've already spent the money,
Yeah,
and it's really all about the TV ratings anyway. So yeah, and
absolutely.
I do think that the worst part about it is what you mentioned, which is the flex scheduling. That is the world's worst idea ever. I mean, that really screws over teams.
Yeah,
It's hard for them to put a Thursday night game on. They really don't get to practice at all. Uh, You
especially
know,
for fans that travel. Just say for instance, here at Philly, you have a Sunday game that the Eagles have. They're going out to San Francisco. But because of the point of the year, the playoff implications, they want the game on a Thursday night. well, you know what, we're going to switch to a Thursday night, and you had flights, hotels scheduled from people leaving Philly to go out there for the weekend. Now all of a sudden, they got to change all that. Yeah, they got to change the flight, change the
Nobody cares
hotel
about
if
any of
they
that though.
can.
That
But
really doesn't matter.
no, it doesn't matter. But see, that's just the frustrating part as a fan.
Well,
And
and
they don't
flex
care.
this. It would have to be flexed more than a week ahead of time. They couldn't flex an NFL team from a Sunday to move it up to a Thursday. That same week.
Well,
It'd
sure,
have
I
to be a
get
week or
that.
two ahead of time. But it wouldn't help the fans much.
Right. No. Especially with some people in their jobs, they gotta give more than a couple weeks notice half the times, or sometimes when they want to
Well, and
make some
also,
kind
like you
of
said, how much is it going to cost to change airline reservations, hotels, and car
exactly.
rentals or whatever else they do? Yeah, so we think it's stupid. NFL, just when you say table it, just let it die. Um,
Yes. Well,
okay,
that Thursday night die altogether.
yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I think that'll let
Yeah.
the whole Thursday night thing die. Okay, so the last thing here, because we are kind of running out of time, and I gotta apologize to our buddy Nolan from Tampa because once again I failed to invite him to talk about his list, but we're gonna do it anyway without him, because we got to keep up with this draft. So we are now up to our draft preview. This week it is cornerbacks. We're gonna blow through this fast because we are running out of time. But the truth is that if you read our weekly mock draft column, Road to the Draft, which is also written by no one, you will see that every mock draft under the sun is mock drafting a corner to Washington in the first round. Personally, I don't totally agree with it. I'm not sure if I was Washington that I would want that, or if I'm a fan, I would want that, but that's what the so-called smart people think. Um, well, first, before we get into the names here, your thoughts on corner in round one for Washington?
Well, after watching what Sauce Gardner did last year for the Jets and how effective he was, when you have someone, if you have someone like a Christian Gonzalez, who's probably gonna be a top 10 pick anyway,
We'll get to
but
him.
if
We'll get to him.
yeah, right, but if somehow if he falls to that point we could trade up for him, he's almost a guy to at least think real hard about. Me, I like Joey Porter a lot. I know I'm a Penn State fan, but I have to understand when he played on the Diaz, and I can't recall the defensive coordinator prior to that. He's played under multiple schemes. He wasn't just always a zone corner. He was a man corner. He was effective in both roles, and he played in a conference. It's a very strong conference. That's very deep in wide receivers. He's a very very good corner. He's a guy that can be that number one on the outside. And then you have, and then we'll go over to corners. Another guy that's kind of worth. I can't think of the top of his name or his name on top of my head, but there are a couple corners I think are worth a first round pick. Do I think that's the direction they should go? Probably not. But if they did, they're going to get a really good one, in my opinion.
Well, Washington has Benjamin St. Just, and they also have Kendall Fuller, who's making a lot of money. Kendall Fuller, is he worth that money? Maybe not. But in the terms of like train wreck position groups, it's not. They granted they definitely need a slot corner for sure. They was a
Yeah.
mess at slot corner, but I don't know if I'd want to burn a number one pick on a slot corner first. And two, I mean, they've got these guys. Ben St. Just is up and coming on a rookie contract.
Well, see,
Uh,
that's the beauty of Christian Gonzalez. So Christian Gonzalez had played some time. He's moved inside the slot and on
I,
the outside. He's very so you could
I'm not
actually
saying
draft
it's the
him.
worst thing in the world.
No, I know. Yeah, I know that. It's just, I'm saying if you wanted someone like a Christian Gonzalez, you could drop him into the slot, have Fuller for one more year on the outside, part ways with
Let
him,
him
and take
go.
him to the outside.
Yeah, it makes
And
some
you could do something
sense.
like that,
I just
sure.
think there's other emergencies. That's all.
No, yeah, I agree. I agree
Okay,
with you on that
let's
too.
run through some of these other players. So, Devin Witherspoon from Illinois, 6 foot 180. He's
He's got-
definitely a day one, first round pick. Christian Gonzalez, who Dave mentioned from Oregon, 6'2", 201, runs a 4.3840. Definitely a first round pick. Joey Porter is, yes, it's that Joey Porter. Joey Porter Jr., the son of former NFL linebacker Joey Porter, 6'2", 190. 192, runs a 4.46. First rounder. Brian Branch, another first rounder. Day one. Alabama. hybrid corner safety, 5'11", 190. Those are kind of the projected possible round one guys. Then you
Hmm.
have a slew of others who are kind of round one, round two, depending on where things go. Cam Smith, South Carolina, 6'1", 187, runs a 4.3, 440. Uh, Kelly Ringo, Georgia. Deontay Banks, Maryland. That group of seven are your day one or possibly day two picks.
And
So
that back end of names that you talked about, I think are the most likely that Washington might go after, anyways. Because I think they're going to focus either offensive line, maybe a linebacker, either offensive line, maybe a linebacker or a tight end. Maybe trade back and grab one of them tight ends in the back end of the first or something like that. You know,
I don't think they're going to be able to back into Christian Gonzalez. I think he's going to be gone.
yeah, I think he's like a top five, top eight pick.
Yeah, even if he's not top five, he's not going to be number 16. So
No,
at most, Joey Porter is a guy. Again, if you look at the our road to the draft column, he is very frequently mock drafted to Washington. So that's
yes,
one to watch out for sure. And the other guy that in the column, and this will be out probably Friday too, um, is Deontay Banks, who the name I read there. He is Maryland, the Maryland corner. So you guys out there should probably know him, if he's from Maryland. Um, no one has thinks he's another one that ought to be looked at for Washington. So there's a bunch of other lists. We're not going to go into detail with them, but sort of the day two guys: Julius Brents from Kansas State, Manuel Forbes, Clark Phillips III, DJ Turner, uh, Kai Blue Kelly, uh, Tyreek Stevenson, Kalon Jones from Texas A&M, Darius Rush, Riley Moss. Those are kind of your next group down, your round, 2, 3, 4 guys, and then there's obviously a whole bunch of others. So
right.
that's corners. Sorry we blew through it fast, but frankly, there's more important things in what going on, which as we know. So I think we've both hit our time limit here, and we have
Yep.
hit the end of our agenda. So Alex, if you're listening, don't puss out next time. Man up. Come on the show. um, so we are done. We'll see y'all next week. Dave, say goodbye.
Take it easy, fellas.
See you next week.
Later.